fellow gods and goddesses, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today we are doing my October wrap-up. So like pretty much everybody on BookTube, October was not a great reading month for me. I didn't really have super ambitious plans like a lot of people did, but I did want to read a lot of books because this is the spooky season, but it just didn't end up happening. But regardless of that, I managed to read 14 books, and I know that sounds like a lot, but I am always going to kind of have a lot of books read in the month just because I have an hour commute 2 to 3 days a week, so I can knock out a lot of audiobooks. So that's the only reason I have so many books read, and even considering that, it really wasn't that memorable of a reading month. October was just the month of unmotivation and mediocre reads. With that happy note, let's get into the books I read. The first book I read this month was The Coldest Girl in Coldtown by Holly Black. This book kind of takes place in like this gray area, this in-between of modern day versus kind of a dystopian kind of world. In this world, vampires are known. They are known about to the public, and there's kind of this virus that goes around for humans if vampires bite them, and there's this whole kind of thing about when people go cold and they turn into vampires, and it's this whole ordeal. And there are these vampire camps, kind of vampire cities, that are called cold towns. So it's a kind of post-apocalyptic, kind of normal functioning society, and I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved the romance in here. I adored the relationship in here, and I really wish that took more of the forefront, because through like the middle half of the book, the love interest kind of goes a separate way from the main character, and I did like the main character. I just really loved the romance, and I wish it was developed more, and for that reason it's kind of a 3-star for me, because I also am not a huge fan of like dystopian kind of styled books, but I really love vampires. I thought it was a unique take on vampires, but it wasn't necessarily my favorite, but I do still love Holly Black's writing style. So I don't know, if you're interested in reading this book, I think it's worth the read, especially during the spooky season, because the audiobook for this is really great. It has this very ominous, spooky, thrillery music to it that adds to the tension, and I thought it was a really good audiobook. So yeah, 3.5 stars to The Coldest Girl in Coldtown, but Gabriel owns me forever and ever, and I love Tana and Gabriel so much. The next book I read was Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson, and this is a YA boarding school mystery thriller murder mystery. I did not enjoy this one whatsoever. I thought this was incredibly boring. I thought a lot of the potential for it was lost, because this takes place in this very selective school that only the best like 20-ish kids get admitted to, and I feel like that could have been such a cool setup to have such interesting like side characters and such an interesting dynamic. But it was super boring. Everybody was super lame. There was this one YouTuber guy, and then there was this other like really rich girl who just talked about Paris all the time, and it was not good in the slightest. It was so boring, and the plot was boring, the characters were boring, and it's more about horny teenagers, but like not even in an interesting way. I just did not enjoy this whatsoever. I think I gave it like a 2.5 out of 5 stars, maybe even just a 2. It just wasn't good, and definitely will not be continuing with this. Very boring, as I've said about 20 times, but I just really want to drive home the fact that this was so boring. Next. The next book I read was even worse than Truly Devious, and honestly it's one of my worst reads of the year, and that is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. I have a whole like judge a book by its cover on this book, so I'm not gonna spend too much time on it, but this was garbage. It is so sporadic. It's so hard to get into because the author does not understand how to develop a world and keep you invested in the story. So you're literally grabbing onto loose threads while you're reading this, and you have to read so much of it to even grasp anything that's going on. And by the time you understand what's going on, you're not invested because you've been spending 150 pages trying to figure out what the hell is going on. The hate to love is not hate to love whatsoever. They literally fall in love with each other despite one of the characters being a complete bigot and misogynistic and just disgusting, and the other main character is super annoying and thinks she's quirky because she says fuck all the time. It's just ridiculous. The world building is non-existent. I just cannot understand why so many people gave this 5 stars, and it really made me not trust BookTube while I was reading this. So that was interesting, but we're moving on from her because, again, if you want to hear more about my thoughts on this, I will link up the review. Proceed with caution. After 2 back-to-back terrible reads, I needed something to pick me up, and I needed something to make me happy, and I needed something to make me inspired. So I finally finished Legendary Ladies, 50 Goddesses to Empower and Inspire You by N. Shen. This is the same author who did Bad Girls Throughout History, and it is just a little composition of various goddesses from all over the world, and each one of them has a little illustration on the side, and it's just short little 1-page description of various goddesses, and I absolutely adore this. Of course this is 5 out of 5 stars. I mean, it's kind of weird to rate something like so short, and this is more like a coffee table kind of book, but I absolutely enjoyed this. I loved how many different goddesses were included in here from all sorts of cultures. I had such a fun time reading this. It really made me so inspired to just want all of these goddesses have their own book and have their own retellings. I think it's absolutely incredible. I want to make like a Pinterest dedicated to just every single one of the goddesses in here. It was just a really fun time, and it's really beautiful. If you want to have like a little quick coffee table book about a bunch of mythological goddesses, this is a stunning book. Also, just wanted to shout out Julia from Shakespeare and Such for getting me Legendary Ladies as a birthday gift. I love it so much, and I love her channel so much, so go check her out and go check out Legendary Ladies. The next book I read was My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinka Brathwaite. Hi, I looked up the pronunciation and it's actually Oyinkan Brathwaite instead, so there you go. This is a thriller, kind of novella styled book following these 2 sisters, and one of these sisters is, you guessed it, a serial killer, and the other sister is the one who always cleans up after her murders. It's really a deep dive into familial relationships and kind of the lengths you're willing to go to support your family and forgive your family and just put up with their literal crimes. It was just a really great book that was really unique, a great take on how you kind of navigate this familial guilt and this burden that family kind of places on you, especially if you are like an older sibling or anything like that. It was a really unique take on that, and I thought the ending was absolute perfection. I know a lot of people, when they read this book and kind of criticize it for being too short, I completely disagree. I thought it was a perfect length. I thought the story wrapped up in such a great way. Was it a little clean? Like, did I want the ending to be a little messier? Yes, but For what it is, I think this is a great book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. If you are interested in it, I recommend it. I also listened to the audiobook for this one, and it was a good time. Now, the next book I read was The Beautiful by Renee Attier. This is a paranormal YA historical fiction fantasy centered around Celine, who is running from her home in France to New Orleans after she kills her attempted rapist. And she gets dragged into this underground society in New Orleans where there are some paranormal creatures and happenings in it, and there is also a murderer going around New Orleans and killing women, and she also gets swept up into that. And this is an absolute beautiful book. I also have a judge a book by its cover on The Beautiful as well. This month I just was pumping out reviews left and right, so if you want to hear my in-depth thoughts, again, spoiler free, also go check that out. I absolutely adored the atmosphere, the writing, the journey that Celine takes, the subtle hints of world building and magic system in here, the romance. There's a love triangle in this that I am so here for. I loved everything about this book. I gave it a 4.5, but honestly, I keep thinking so much about this book and I just love it so much. Also, if you want to hear the author talk about her book, I also have a reading vlog where I filmed the signing that I went to for this. The next book I read was The Devouring Gray by Christine Lynn Herman. This is a very like Riverdale-esque book about this girl who moves into her family's old town called Four Paths, and in Four Paths there are these founding families that are tasked to protect this town from the Gray, which is this forest, otherworldly, Stranger Things upside down kind of thing that's like a monster, but it's kind of complicated. But this one I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. This was another one that really fell flat to me. I think the concept is really interesting, but the follow through of it was just not what I was expecting. A lot of this book deals with the petty familial drama between the founding families. The drama and the tension and the problems between the inner founding families just seemed like petty gossip and like high school kind of drama. And compared to the forest that's actually killing people, the stakes were just not on the right scale for me. And because we were focusing so much on the familial drama, it just really made everything very slow and boring. And even while following the families and their inner tension and all those things, you still didn't get a lot of the backstory and a lot of the character development that would have shined through if the author kind of went there. And overall, I just was not a fan. The only character that I really loved was Isaac Sullivan, and I know he's getting a point of view in the second book, and so I definitely think I'm going to read the sequel eventually. But I'm just looking back and I don't know if I really want to, just because it was so underwhelming. But we shall see. I'm not going to write it off completely, but if I happen to come across the sequel when it comes out next year, then I'll read it and we'll see how I think about it. But overall, this was underwhelming and not what I was expecting. And the next book is my absolute best read of the month, and that was The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. I also have a judge a book by its cover for this book, which is one of my, I would say, most important videos that I've done. I think my review really brings to light a lot of my frustration with the way that BookTube presented this book and kind of made it die in the hype and turned a lot of people off to it, when this book really revolutionized so many things for me and I feel like for the YA genre. But Anyways, I'm not going to get too much into that because I talk a lot about that in my review. But The Gilded Wolves follows a group of nerds who are trying their best. That's kind of the blurb that I hear a lot when people talk about this book, and it's super accurate. It is a treasure hunting, very like National Treasure meets Indiana Jones, and it's got magical elements to it. And it follows a heist looking for ancient artifacts, following this group of individuals, and the character development of each of the characters in relation to each other. The plot and the actual heist elements are so intricate. Roshani is so incredibly smart. Reading this, you see the inner workings of how a heist actually works and like what it actually looks like. And again, if you're a fan of those movies that I mentioned, this is so good. It has so much historical elements to it. It has both biblical and like Greek mythological elements to it as well. It's so again intricate, and it's all done in a way that is a commentary on colonialism, and it's just the representation in this, the magic in this, the world building in this, the characters, the romance, the writing. Oh my god, the writing is literally so gorgeous. I just cannot say good enough things about this. This is absolutely one of my favorite books of the year. Please go check out my review. It's also spoiler free. It's a lot about a discussion on how kind of books like these, like written by people of color, and themes that people of color go through are treated in this community. It's an important video and I want people to watch it. And I really want people to read this, so definitely go check it out. I am absolutely a member of the Gilded Wolves support group, so hit me up in the DMs if you ever want to fangirl about these characters. Loved them so much, loved this book so much, and I'm so excited for the sequel. I need it, I'm ready. I'm not ready, but I'm ready and I want it and I need it. Oof. We dipped again in my enjoyment with the next book, and that book was Wicked King by Holly Black. This book quite possibly may be my most disappointing read of the year. This was the most surprising and underwhelming book I have read in a while. It's not the worst book I've ever read, not by a long shot, but it's one that I had hyped up in my mind and everybody else had hyped it up for me so much that when I read it and the result and the product that I consumed did not even close resemble the hype that I had in my mind. This, I'm sure you guys know, is the sequel to The Cruel Prince, and it's basically a fairy book revolving around a mortal girl who's trying to gain power in this fairy world that treats her badly and kind of subjugates her to shitty living, basically. Even though not really shitty living, because she's super rich and still gets some protection from her adopted father. But anyways, regardless, moving on. This had zero elements of The Cruel Prince that I adored and supported. The Cruel Prince was innovative, it was dark, it was conniving, it had great plot and inner workings and like little politics and like just levels to the product. Just had so many complexities. Jude as a character grew so much, and just the way her mind worked and seeing the just the metal workings in how she was implementing her plan and gaining power, the tension between her and Carden, all of that was just non-existent in The Wicked King. First of all, it takes place like 6 months or 4 months after The Cruel Prince. So how The Cruel Prince ended, like I wanted to be there immediately after it ended to see how Jude came into her new power that she created for herself. And The whole thing was just both very slow, and also all of the plot moving components happened so quickly, and there was zero development to absolutely anything. It was just a cheap version of The Cruel Prince. Even the tension between Cardan and Jude wasn't really there. All of the moments where acknowledged their attraction towards each other was just came out of nowhere. That hateful kind of lustful relationship that we see between Jude and Cardan, all of that is in the ending of The Cruel Prince. Like, there isn't that sexual tension in The Wicked King, in my opinion. The writing wasn't as good. There wasn't as many very like meaningful quotes to there. Jude's character was incredibly stagnant. She didn't really go through any development whatsoever. She didn't have any of that conniving kind of manipulative personality that I loved so much in The Cruel Prince. It just was not good. And I will admit that I did enjoy the ending, but I was spoiled for it, so that I didn't have that shock of it. I did like the ending. But even saying that, the ending, like the rest of the book, just did not have enough development. I thought this book needed to be at least 100 more pages. It just really goes to show what happens to a series when you publish 2 books in a year and don't really take the time to develop the book and give it enough attention that it really deserves. And that's really disappointing for me, because everybody was saying how amazing The Wicked King is, and I really don't see it in any capacity. I am setting my expectations like dirt low for Queen of Nothing. I don't think I'm going to enjoy it, if I'm being honest, unless Cardan gets murdered by Jude. If Jude murders Cardan, it'll be a 5-star regardless of anything else that happens in the book. But if that doesn't happen, it's going to be a difficult thing for me to rate and enjoy. That being said, I think I gave this a 3-star, but it really honestly deserves a 2.5. I'm so sorry. I know that is so harsh, but it just was not good. It was so cheap. Like, we deserve so much more, because we know what Holly Black can give us. So the fact that that's what she gave us, I'm like, my standards are much higher than this. I also read The Lost Sisters by Holly Black, which is the novella from Taryn's perspective. I don't remember what I rated this. I think I rated like 4 stars. I liked it. And I want to love Taryn. I want to stan her. I want to give her all of my support. But I just think Holly Black has not given her the attention that she deserves. I want Taryn to get as much development and ambition as Holly Black gives Matic. So that's what I want. I want Taryn to just give me more, and she hasn't given me enough. The next book I read was Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray. This is the 3rd book in the Diviner series, and I didn't enjoy this. I'm just gonna be straight up with you guys. I did not enjoy this. It was so long, and it was so not needed to be that long. It was boring. If I'm thinking objectively, I know the book isn't boring. There is a bunch of stuff in it, but I just was not invested in the story, and I think I'm just not invested in the story as a whole anymore. I just don't like series. I just don't like them. I just get bored, and you're just drawing out the inevitable so much that once it even gets there, I'm just like, oh yay, great, we're here, finally, I guess. But I'm just tired by that time, and I don't want to read anymore. I will say though that the ending in this was phenomenal. Like, the ending was 10 out of 10. I'm obviously going to read King of Crows because I've already gotten this far, but I don't really have too high of expectations, and I'm not extremely excited for it, but I will read it. eventually. And finally, the last book that I read this month that I will talk about in this wrap-up was The Deathless Girls by Kieran Millwood Hargrave. This was the Cover Whores book club for the month of October, and this is a backstory into the 2 out of 3 brides of Dracula. It follows 2 sisters, and they are travelers, and one day their traveler group was attacked by soldiers, and they were taken as slaves by the nearby lord. It's really a story about sisterly love. There is a female-female romance in here as well. It's just a exploration in 2 different ways on how someone deals with such a difficult and hard situation that is, you know, being slaves. It also has a vampiric element to it, but it's not really there until page 200. So this is really a very quiet, fantastical, atmospheric read looking at the relationship between these sisters and these characters. This is a difficult one for me to recommend because there's not really any plot, nothing really crazy happens ever. It's, again, like I said, very quiet. It more deals with the atmosphere and the characters more than anything else. This has made me really excited to try out more UK published books. I loved the look into traveler culture. The author is from northern India, but I'm not sure if her family has any Romani roots. It is own voices in a sense of the discussions of race in here and how the sisters are treated in comparison to the settler people who are lighter in complexion and things of that nature. So I just absolutely adored this, and I mean, the cover is like, look at how beautiful that is. It's absolutely stunning. So I would say if you are a person who enjoys character-driven books and don't really need a ton of plot and you love atmospheric reads, I would say give this a chance because I was really engrossed and transported into the story, and I loved every single minute of it. The other 2 books that I read in the month is for a separate video, so I'm not going to talk about them here. So that is the end of this wrap up. Let me know down below if you read any of the books that I read and what you thought of them, or tell me what your least or favorite book of the month was. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye!